The preseason is underway in the Ontario Hockey League, and the totally unexpected is happening already. The defending champion Hamilton Bulldogs are 2-0. Settle down. It's preseason hockey. The unexpected, though, is happening as well, and that is everybody is mad at the London Knights. So I think we're in mid-season form as we're early into the Ontario Hockey League preseason. I'm Mike Farwell. Dan Mahar is over there. Welcome back to another episode of the OHL Podcast. Please like, subscribe, tell a friend about it, send us an email anytime. If there's a guest you want to hear from, an idea you've got, or some constructive criticism you want to share, OHL Podcast at Rogers.com. Dan, we've got a lot to chew on with this episode alone. But before we get into it, I'm going to throw you, I was going to say a curveball. Maybe this is chin music because I didn't prepare you for this, but I know you're going to have an opinion. So just roll with it. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Before we sat down to record today's episode, I want to take you back to earlier in the day. My family and I were in a small Ontario town looking for a place to eat lunch. Now, for the record, if you've tried to eat lunch in any small town, I was on a vacation mid-August in some small towns in the United States. It's hard to find restaurants that are actually open in the evening, on Sundays. I guess staffing post-pandemic's a little bit of a challenge. So keep that in mind. Nonetheless, we found a chain restaurant to eat at in this small Ontario town earlier today. It is a restaurant, I'm not here to name drop Harvey's. It's a restaurant that's known for its hamburgers. The slogan even used to tell you that they make your hamburger a beautiful thing. And the order that was placed before ours in this hamburger chain restaurant was, I would like this with this, and that topping, but no bun, thank you very much. And I ask you this, Dan Mahar, I ask you this, have we reached, is that an indication that we have made our way to peak entitlement as a society of human beings? You go to a hamburger chain, but you want your hamburger without the bun. Here's a thought. Don't go to the hamburger chain for lunch. That's all.
Oh, I'm with you. I think this is totally a sign of the apocalypse. Who does that? I mean, there's so much I could say. This could take up the whole half hour. Suffice it to say, I'm with you 100%. You do not go into Harvey's and ask for a hamburger with no bun.
I don't like, honestly, I think that's over the top with the, I need it done just my way. You're in a hamburger, please tell me there are other places you could go to just get a piece of meat. If you wanted to, you could even go to the grocery store and buy your own. I don't understand going into the restaurant. These poor people behind the counter must have been wondering, okay, so lettuce, tomato, mayo, ketchup, mustard, and the piece of meat. No, it's Harvey's, people. It's for hamburgers. Honest to goodness.
They're overthinking it, Mike. They're overthinking it.
Okay. As long as we're on the same page with that, I don't want to let this episode slide either before we get into why everybody's mad at the London Knights, and perhaps incorrectly in this case, but we'll get to it. I don't want to let this episode slide without you talking about your experience at the preseason game in Kitchener on Sunday, because much like people were in front of me in line at Harvey's today, there was somebody behind you in line buying tickets when David Jesus and the Niagara Ice Dogs came into the Odd to play the Rangers. And so, sorry, who was buying the tickets behind you?
It was Mary and Joseph. At least as my understanding, it was Jesus's parents, so that's who I'm led to believe. So
gotta be
that's who was there. I didn't introduce myself, but they seemed busy. But they were looking for a place to stay for the night, I think.
If only we could have had a good manger to recommend. Well played, sir. In case you couldn't tell, Dan and I ran into each other at the game, and Dan dropped that line on me. He says, yeah, Mary and Joseph were behind me in line buying tickets. And what? Jesus's parents. I'm like, oh, that's good. And I made a note right then. That is going to make it to air, because if you're not coming here for the hockey, come here for the comedy. And again, we're open for reviews on either bit of content. OHL Podcast at Rogers.com. One more thing I think we should note, and I have a feeling much like the Harvey's experience, Dan, you're going to agree with me on this, but as the preseason got underway and teams started playing against one another this past weekend, Let's hear it for the girls, shall we? Lacey Senek refs the Mississauga Guelph game in Missy on Friday, and then back in Guelph for the Storm home end of that back-to-back. Hillary Brennan was the ref, along with Marlo Schott, who worked the lines. And I know you're going to agree with me on this, Dan. It's so great to see women finally, should I say, I think, getting their due in the Ontario Hockey League and really the game more broadly.
Yeah, 100%. I think the more we see this normalized, the better. And we talked about this huge talent pool that's out there, largely ignored for decades. And here we go. And just to tie into that, and my shirt can't really get on camera here, but this is a little nod to the women who won the World Championship just the other day, and what a game. The Canadian women deserve all their due. I'm not even going to reference the Hockey Canada nonsense right now because this is about their moment. I don't want anything to detract from that. As usual, rope-a-dope to the Americans in the round robin, came back hard in the final and won it. And so it all ties together that the contributions women are making to the game right now are just increasing, and I think that's only a good thing.
Yeah, I ran into a long time member of the league when I came into that preseason game at the Odd on the weekend. And that was the first thing we talked about, was having the women on the ice as officials. And I got to say, when I think about it now, I kind of shake my head and say, or ask, what took so long? Like, how did it take so long for this to happen? Because what do you need by way of ability to do the job? You need to be able to skate, and you need to understand the rules so that you can call them. And last time I checked, women can do that just as well as guys can. So it's about damn time as far as I'm concerned.
Oh yeah, and you hear a lot of hooey over the years, things like, oh well, are women going to be able to handle the fights and these big bodies when they're together and pull people apart? Well, you can find a lot of baloney excuses to suggest that they're not capable of the job. I think this is just proving in spades that they are, and we can throw out all that nonsense we've heard over the years. They're just as capable. They're here. They're proving it, and this is great moving forward.
It takes us back to November of 2021. So just under a year ago, Kirsten Welsh became the first woman to officiate. She was a liney for a regular season game, and that one was a Rangers Owen Sound affair back in November of 21. And if you know anything about that season series last year, there was some bad blood. So Kirsten Welsh had her work cut out for her. She did just fine. So having seen Lacey Senek, Hillary Brennan, and Marlo Schott in preseason action, can't wait to see the first woman in a regular season game again this year. Again, it just seems to be about time. It must be OHL time again, because fans, I got a message, Dan, not long after the deal was announced, saying, how does London keep getting away with this? And I said, pump your brakes just a little bit. I don't think the Knights are necessarily getting away with something here, but the reality is that the 4th overall pick in this year's OHL draft, which went to the Niagara Ice Dogs in the form of Sam Dickinson, is now a member of the London Knights. Many, including the Knights, claim that Dickinson was the best defenseman available in the Ontario Hockey League draft, and now the Knights have him. But it comes at a price. I'll just start with you in the high-level way here. Your take on Dickinson's defection, if you will, from Niagara.
Okay, well, if I could start with just that piece about everyone's angry at the Knights. The Knights seem to end up with all these guys, cook deals, backroom stuff, whatever you want to call it. Here's the thing. So back in the day, this might have transpired as player says he's not going to report to anyone except London. London spends an 8th rounder on him, and miraculously he's at camp. Woe is the league. So here you have teams wising up, and you've seen a number of times over the last few years, and the Ice Dogs did it, where they say, we're going to select the player. If London wants him, they can come get him, and they're going to pay a price. So you have a bit of a scenario here unfolding where London paid dearly in picks to get the player. So the Ice Dogs make out well. They have a defected player that they can't draft, and I will just say that a lot of the complaints are, you have a player that doesn't want to play in a certain market or demands to play in one of 2 markets or something like that. They shouldn't be allowed to play at all. You go where you're drafted, and if you don't go where you're drafted, they report you defected. They get a compensatory pick, and the player goes back in the draft. That's what I hear a lot. So keep in mind the OHL, CHL are all about recruitment, getting the best talent in the league. So they will look at having these players more heavily weighted into the Londons and other cities like that as the lesser of two evils versus having them go to the States and play in competing leagues. So that said, I think the system right now at least compensates those teams fairly. The only issue I will have, and I'll leave it at this for now to turn it back to your thoughts, is I don't like that teams get the compensatory pick as well as the boatload of picks for the player. It seems a little bit like double dipping, and the only one that really loses in this system are the other 18 teams who had nothing to do with it, because their pick drops a slot based on that compensatory pick. So it slightly unfairly punishes the other teams. So I don't love that about it. But at least we have a system now where those players are showing up in the league and there's proper compensation of the team who didn't get the player. That said, I think we're all going to benefit from watching Dickinson in the league. So I'm not sure what your thoughts are there, but that's my take.
Well, there is a part of me, and it's not too small a part, maybe 25%, let's say, that subscribes to the idea that it's a privilege to play this game. It's certainly a privilege to play this game in the Ontario Hockey League with all of the eyes that are on you and the development that you can achieve with virtually any of the clubs in the league. So there's a part of me that says, you know what, you should go where you're drafted. But I think you're bang on the money, Dan, when you talk about the Ontario Hockey League and the Canadian Hockey League, looking at this as the lesser of two evils insofar as, would we rather have this player in our league or would we rather have this player in the United States somewhere? And obviously the answer to that is we want this player in our league. The other point, and again, it's well taken, the impact on the other 18 teams, as you point out here. But this happens rarely enough that for me, I don't think it's something that we have to start sounding alarm bells over. If this was a regular occurrence, okay. But I think really the greater attention is on it this time around, because which team does it involve? Oh, the London Knights end up landing a game-changing player. Well, get in line. Every single year with every single draft, you could talk about the London Knights landing a game-changing player, whether it be through the entry draft, whether it be through a trade, you name it. But I want to go back to something you touched on in terms of the boatload of picks. And this is the thing where I pushed back against that first fan that said to me, how does London get away with this? I wouldn't say that London or any team that acquires Sam Dickinson in this case is getting away, in quotes, with anything. It was 7 picks, 3 seconds, 3 thirds, and a 5th rounder go to Niagara in exchange for Sam Dickinson. Plus the Ice Dogs get that compensatory pick, 5th overall next year that you already alluded to. So for a team that has just gone through what the Ice Dogs have gone through, sanctions here, sanctions there, ownership change, rebuild, I think it's the Ice Dogs that kind of get away with something in the final analysis.
Oh, 100%. That's the thing. If you're selecting the player strategically, likely knowing he wasn't going to report, but you get the compensatory pick next year and you get all those picks that London paid. So it's hard to look at this deal and say, wow, London really got away with murder here. London paid a fair price, whether you like it or not. They paid a hefty price to get the player. And sure, they get access to some players that other franchises may not. Having said that, Niagara Ice Dogs made out the best of anyone in this situation, and it's only going to strengthen their club going forward, which strengthens the league going forward. Which you can spin this however you want, but at least we're seeing some fair compensation for these players now, shifting allegiances.
I don't know if this is going to make anyone feel better, but when this trade occurred, it did remind me, of course, of the famous trade about a decade ago that also involved the London Knights when Max Domi was the player that would not report. Now, by all accounts, back in 2011, the Frontenacs deliberately drafted Domi, knowing, and I think the whole league knew, that Max Domi wanted to play in London. So I think looking back, and I'm pretty sure it was Darren Keeley. I should have checked. I think Darren Keeley was still the GM in Kingston at the time. Nonetheless, no, or was Gilmore was the GM in Kingston at the time, or just a head coach. Either way, doesn't matter. They were a team for a lot of the time, Gilmore and Keeley. Nonetheless, they did that, I think, with intent, knowing that London wanted Domi and would not stand for any other team having him, and Domi was going to defect. But just to give you some understanding here of the way the prices have increased, 3 seconds is what London had to pay Kingston back in 2011 for Max Domi. Then the Fronts get that compensatory pick the following year. And what becomes really interesting then, and this is where I'm not sure that people are going to think this is, I don't think it's going to make anybody feel any better, but Kingston drafted that next year, Listowel's Roland McEwen, and then Sam Bennett in the first round. And then they had these 4 picks in the top 30, but those 2 first rounders, McEwen and Sam Bennett, and everybody was talking about the Kingston Frontenacs have made out like bandits here. They've built this team, 4 picks in the top 30 in that 2012 draft. Here come the Fronts. And of course, the Fronts did what the Fronts have historically done and fell short in the playoffs. So I don't know if it makes you feel any better now, but just think of 3 seconds in 2011, 3 seconds, 3/3, and a 5th in 2022. That's the difference in prices for about a decade ago.
Yeah, and you know, that's a great point, Mike, a great example. I mean, you can look at a few of those trades now that have happened, like Victor Mete is another one where strategically Owen Sound said, you know, we know player's not coming here. We know he's going to report to London. Strategically, we say, you know, we don't necessarily need our first round pick this year based on the way our roster is composed. So let's do it. Let's take them. Let's flip them to London, get the picks, and be that much better off for it a year or 2 down the road when we can start accumulating these players through the draft. So it's a strategy that teams can now start to employ and say, you know, fine, you want to go to London, you want to go to Kitchener, you want to go to Windsor, wherever, we're going to make you pay. We hold this pick. We can forego the player this year and do it strategically. And like you pointed out with Kingston, and I would argue that in the post-Mete era that the Owen Sound attack have done pretty well and become a pretty decent place to play as well. So it just strengthens the league when you have these prices rising, I guess, for these teams that can move these players.
Rumor has it, and it's just rumor because I don't have the security clearance to talk to any of these gentlemen, but rumor has it that Ty Domi and Doug Gilmour don't talk to one another anymore because Ty was so pissed off that Doug and the Frontenacs took Max in that draft, knowing he wanted to go to London. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. I know for certain I don't want to be on Ty Domi's bad side. I probably don't want to be on Doug Gilmour's bad side either. But it is interesting when you bring up the Mete situation that there seems to be a tendency for the London Knights to be on the receiving end of these top end players for whatever reason. But I guess they create an environment. And when you follow the story a little bit closer and you get into Dave Gagne, whose son Sam played for the London Knights and is very close, was an assistant coach with the team, etc. Gagne's connection to Dickinson, he obviously knows, Gagne as the player rep, what the London Knights can provide organizationally to best develop Sam Dickinson into a future NHLer and all of the untold riches that come along with that.
Yeah, and we all know the London Knights have a lot more resources than some teams, and that might be unfair, that might be not equal, might create some issues and some jealousy and some rage, and certainly you don't like that behind the scenes imbalance, but you also have to tip your cap to teams that provide those resources to players and develop them. Frankly, like the London Knights have a pretty good track record of developing pros, and that's why a lot of kids will want to play there. And you can say what you want about conjecture and rumors about what else might happen behind the scenes, but the bottom line is these players want to be pros, they want to be NHLers, and you have a franchise with a very good track record of creating that. So it's an environment a lot of players and agents will want to seek out if they want to consider the OHL.
So are we going to land here in this conversation, Dan, on the side that we're okay with the way this rule is structured right now until or unless it becomes something we see happen with greater frequency? Because I feel like that's kind of where we ended up. I get why people get pissed off because, of course, it's the London Knights and they get a really strong player out of this, arguably the best defenseman available in the draft. They didn't pick 4th, but they're getting that pick. If this was happening every year and teams were, because again, I think Niagara's the big winner here. That I can't see this being anything other than a win for the Ice Dogs organization.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's close to an ideal situation now. The only tweak I would make, which I referenced earlier, is I don't love seeing the heavy double dipping where the team gets the compensatory pick 1 slot lower than they drafted plus the boatload of picks. So assuming we're not going to entirely remove the compensatory pick, which I think would be fair, assuming you're getting a good return like that, have one or the other. They want to keep the compensatory pick at least perhaps slotted the way the NHL does, where end of round. So you picked them in the first round, you get a sandwich pick between the first and second round. So you're not drastically impacting the other 18 teams and saying, you were picking 6, sorry, now you're picking 7. At least the first round stays untouched. They get a compensatory pick that's still of good value between the first and second rounds, plus your picks acquired in the trade. So that for me would be the ideal scenario, but perhaps I'm splitting hairs. I think we're pretty close to a scenario that works.
Yeah, and I'm not positive you're splitting hairs there, because that does make a lot of sense to me. That sandwich pick between the rounds, it's still a compensatory first rounder, right? You're getting a 21st pick for all intents and purposes. And to your point earlier, you're not negatively impacting, even by one slot in the draft, the other 18 teams who had absolutely nothing to do with any of this. Hey, North Bay, you were not involved in this. Hey, Flint, you had nothing to do with this. Your pick next year will not be impacted. Unfortunately, the case is right now that those picks will be impacted.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you talk about it being a rarity right now, which is true, but hypothetically, this becomes a strategy, and 2, 3, 4 teams start using it a year. Suddenly, your pick slides 3 or 4 picks in the first, then it becomes more important. So that's one tweak I would like to see. I'm not sure how realistic it is to see it, but it would remove that air of double dipping you're seeing from these teams moving players.
I think when I look back, it was the 4th and the 12th picks that Kingston got in 11, in and around there anyway, when they got McEwen and Bennett in the first round. But the other thing is, again, it's hypothetical, and there are 68 regular season games to play still, and who knows what the playoffs hold. But Niagara, we know, is absolutely in the midst of a rebuild. They might, with a compensatory 5th pick already on the books for next year in the first round, they might have 2 top 5 picks at this. I mean, we don't know. And I don't want to paint the Ice Dogs into the bottom of the Eastern Conference or the league by any stretch, but we know it's a rebuilding year for that team based in St. Catharines. So here's one more quick note on the Ice Dogs. So I go to the rink on Sunday, where the Rangers had Fan Fest outside and then the game versus the Ice Dogs inside. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to kind of bird dog this one from the view from my usual press box. We weren't doing any broadcasting. We won't start that until the regular season starts. But when I got to the rink, there were people in my radio booth. And so I thought, well, you know what, me being me, I'm just going to waltz right in there and say, excuse me, but this is where I usually hang out. Who the heck are you? And the first guy to turn around and extend his hand says, hi, I'm Darren. Oh, like as in DeBobble, or the new owner of the Niagara Ice Dogs. He says, yeah, I should have double checked how to actually pronounce his name. I should know this by now. I promised to get it sorted out. But there was Darren, along with a bit of his entourage, enjoying the view from, which we have a very good one, by the way, when we call games in Kitchener. And I didn't care one bit. I didn't need to be in the booth. I thought this is a good opportunity to go meet some random people at the rink, but it just turned out to be the new ownership of the Niagara Ice Dogs in Kitchener on Sunday. So there you go.
Well, maybe he owes you an interview in an upcoming Ice Dogs Rangers game for that use of your spot. So maybe you work this in your favor, maybe.
This is exactly what's already on my mind. Excuse me, Darren, remember that time that you were in my seat at the hockey game? You're going to get in the hot seat now, and we'll do a little interview for the OHL podcast. He is Dan Mahar. My name is Mike Farwell. Find Dan on Twitter at Tim Wallach. Yes, just like the former Montreal Expo. I'm at Farwell_OHL. Please give the podcast a like, subscribe, tell a friend about it, and send us an email anytime at ohlpodcast@rogers.com. Another episode comes out on Friday, and Dan and I are already planning a little chat about what the Ontario Hockey League might need to do now that it's coming back to quote unquote normal. The pandemic's a thing of the past. So what's the future for the Ontario Hockey League? We talk about that on Friday's episode. Thanks for joining us on this one. It is the OHL Podcast.